Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks to another edition of the Transformation Leaders podcast. And I'm here joined today with Sean, my co-host. And today we're going to talk to you about the state of local large language models, but specifically the hardware and kind of how things have changed or are going to change, and maybe depending on the industry and things of that nature. So Sean, if you don't mind, why don't you kick us off and get us started and talk to us a little bit about the hybrid local reality here?
Yeah, so today a lot of people are consuming an obscene amount of cloud services when it comes down to AI. Whether your provider of choice is Google, Azure, or OpenAI, the result is the same. You're given an API, and then you're consuming, and then you track how many tokens. But there is a lot of need, if not desire, to do more things at the edge. Now, we have talked about this quite a few times. This isn't the first time we've had this conversation. There is a wonderful guide, David, that you wrote that showed you how to install this on your local PC. But there are more models coming out, much smaller language models that are coming out that do a great job at the majority of what you would use them for today. And the use cases are amazing. So what I wanted to do is kind of take the audience through what this technology is and what is available today. So there's many reasons to be local when it comes to large language models. By far, it is security. Security is the number one pushback you're going to get from the organization when you're deploying AI. They're going to say, hey, we don't want to leak data. Well, you get an agreement with the provider that they're not going to use your data to train with. Okay, fine. But there's more than just that. Leveraging personal identifiable information, PII, is a problem maybe you can't get around. There's lots of strategies to get around it, but let's say you can't. What you're using the AI is really hyper-personalized. So with that in place, hey, we need to, instead of removing the PII, we need to remove the large language model from the cloud. The second is, I think, where this is going to, and where I was originally thinking about when I was playing with what I'm going to show everybody, which is the edge AI. Being able to do things at the edge. This is the reason why your phone has AI capabilities. Your laptop has AI capabilities. Everybody is pushing AI to the edge. Why? So that hopefully you can use the cloud in a much more robust, cost-effective way. If every query you have of what's today's date, why is the sky blue? All the easy stuff that is very straightforward. If that is all being done in the cloud, you're going to have an enormous cloud problem and a cost problem. So pushing AI problems out to the edge is something that everybody wants to do. Now, last but certainly not least, there's people out there who are big into home automation. There are people who are looking for automation in an industrial capacity, and being able to take the power of a large language model and place it on a small portable device so that you can install it just as you would any kind of IoT device on your shop floor could be very beneficial. So again, everybody talked about the cloud opportunity, but there is another opportunity which is rolling out of the edge. David?
Yeah, one of the use cases that we ran across late or maybe October timeframe of late last year was for a client. One of the reasons that they were pushing to go local, they didn't have a requirement to go local, but and when I say local, all right, so local's a relative term. So local could be in all of your stuff is on a VPC in a cloud environment, and it's in a virtual network in that cloud environment, and you may have multiple virtual networks inside of that cloud infrastructure, or you may be cloud agnostic and have stuff mixed through AWS, Azure, et cetera, et cetera. The relevancy on the local, what could be determined or defined as local, is essentially having and moving the large language model as close to all of the Legos or all of the pieces that make up the solution. So if you're running a customer service type or CX type of application where there's voice and the interactivity is voice driven and you're talking to it and it has to do voice to text and then has to analyze that text, and then it has to go text to speech, which means that the robot or whatever it is going to provide audio feedback because you're in a dialogue situation. You're talking milliseconds of response time that is necessary. So in that context, local means, again, all of the Legos are together in one batch, and you're not sending stuff out across the wire, over the internet, over multiple distributed networks, but it could also be on-prem too. So just wanted to kind of call out that local is a relative term in the context of specifically what we're talking about here. And so for you listening, this could mean many different things to you, but obviously, as all things, if you guys get spun around or confused, Sean and I are here to help you.
Excellent. So, this is where I started my journey with using large language models locally. And this is running it on my PC. It's pretty cost effective. But if, for example, I was wanting to do some crazy AI questions while we're trying to stream here today, that would cause a problem. Yep. So if you are like me and David and are on webcon calls with customers 4 or 5 hours a day, this may not be your best option. But I want to call out, we did, I believe, a podcast on this last year, or maybe even the year before last, as well as there was an excellent getting started guide that David has put together to show you how to do this option A. The power of most desktops that you get today should have this capability. In fact, with Apple Intelligence, that is going to be the norm. Now, I know Apple Intelligence is a joke right now, but again, I expected to have a lot more power in what they are doing moving forward. So option B, we did a podcast this last year where I bought a NanoPi, which was about $200. And it was basically 1/6 of the power that you'd have running on your desktop. Now, it went through and we showed what we could do. I tried to do things like a RAG model running on it. I tried creating a new model from scratch on it. Lots of different things that I tried doing with this. And one thing that came out beyond a shadow of a doubt, using a cloud resource or a GPU server is way better. And we went through and showed that the value of having such a small system on a chip that does AI, the use cases available for it were very minimalistic. Now, what I have done over the holidays is the Raspberry Pi initiative, which hopefully everybody has heard of Raspberry Pi, but they are the one laptop per child Chromebook. They're carrying the torch from that program, where if you can create a standardized chip, system on a chip, and make millions of them, you can lower the cost significantly. And they've started doing what's called an AI hat. So this is something that you put on top of a Raspberry Pi that has AI processing capabilities. Now, you can see the prices here was $260 if you want to go crazy. But I got my hat for about $85. I already had a Pi. I had a Pi 4, which worked just fine. And those are $50, $60. So, I know it says $260 here, but for me, it was only $85. And it's saying that computer vision is a great use case for this, which it is. So I go back to the conversation we had about smart automation and home assistant. A lot of people use this to do their computer vision of cameras at their house, so they can see who's coming up to the house, play on Alexa, hey, Sean has reached the front of the house. You could do some very interesting things with this technology with that. I'm more interested in, can I run a large language model on it? And the capabilities that I've seen of this is comparable to running it on your desktop. You can run a Gemma 3 model the same speed as running on your desktop, which is really all that you need. So, David, what do you think?
Yeah, so a lot of these technologies are pretty much the same. To the guide that you mentioned that I had provided last year, it's even gotten easier, guys. So I don't know if anybody watching the podcast has had an opportunity to download the latest version of Ollama. This is probably one of the more popular ones, including LM Studio, which, by the way, you can go to aigetsstarted.com, download the free book, walk you through the whole setup. But more importantly, is Ollama now has a GUI, a web interface that comes along for the ride. It used to just be command line only. And the changes in Ollama make it so easy for anybody to just play and get started. So you download it, install it. Now you have literally a chat environment. More importantly, though, through the open sourced large language models provided by OpenAI, it's the OSS series, they now, Ollama does, and I'm going to put a disclaimer, air quote, you have to register for an account. It's free, but you do have to sign in order to use this feature. The point is, if you've got a really slow machine, so this Raspberry Pi hat is one of these use cases where maybe you don't have a lot of power on it, but it has internet connectivity and you're simply just using it for edge compute or a node on the edge. You have the ability to run Ollama and these OSS 120 billion parameter model, by the way, about 70 to 90 tokens per second. And and I'm going to have to put another disclaimer after I tell you this, but the point is you can run that model now, not on the local inference. You run it off the cloud hardware. Now, here comes the disclaimer. This circumvents everything we talked about, which was the number one reason that you'd want to pull this local, and that is security. So if you run something like Ollama and you use the OSS model where Ollama is the one doing the hosting, you're sending your data out over the wire and the whole thing's pointless. So just you got to keep an eye on all of this stuff because all of these moving parts are constantly moving. So to each and every one, whatever you're running, just make sure that it's spec to the hardware and that the hardware can do it. And test is the number one thing. The other thing that's out there too, as far as solutions that lend itself really good to running on a Raspberry Pi, is if you go to the LLM.ai, this is a production / enterprise way of running large language models, not with a user or graphical interface. It's similar to a Llama, but it's geared towards enterprises. So if you're an enterprise customer and you're looking to put something in your cloud or bring something local, run the LLM. It is the engine that you can put a large language model in it, and there's a plethora out there on Hugging Face that you can download and interact with it. But the key here is that this particular server will lend itself really nicely to those smaller hardware. Now, I personally have a Raspberry Pi. I haven't broke that out in a long time. I think it's a 4 or something or other, about 8 gigs of RAM, run Linux on it. And the other thing that I have is the Mac Mini. And so I've played with all of those. And these technologies that I just called out work really, really well to run these local large language models, keeping you with the security. But again, another way, if you're not too concerned about the security, but you're worried about the performance on something like a Raspberry Pi, you get the advantages of the Pi to the edge, but you get the 96 to 70-ish tokens per second by using or offloading something like the OSS models that are hosted through a Llama. So a couple of different ways to configure it. I know it's a little bit more technical perspective and not necessarily a strategic conversation, but these are some of the challenges that Sean and I have seen over the last couple of weeks, days, months, and years. And so as this evolves, you're just going to have to continue to watch podcasts like this that'll keep you in the know, because Sean and I are on the front lines trying to see what makes this stuff work and tick and break.
Yep. And this is now a very useful option. Number one is this is Raspberry Pi. This isn't some weird unknown Chinese company like Friendly Electric, which you have to pay an enormous amount in tariff costs to get their hardware now. It matches up to a lot of the hardware that has already been pre-existing for over a decade. And it sips power too. So, that is a good reason versus, I bought a 24 gig GPU last year and that was $800. And I was lucky to get it for $800 because now it's $1,600. This hardware is getting more and more expensive. I don't know if any of you are aware of the current prices for RAM. Things are getting incredibly painful in that arena. Well, what is remaining the same is the Raspberry Pi. So you could get a 16 gig Pi 5 for $145 new. And I think it costs 16 gigs for a stick of memory. For 16 gig stick of memory is like $200 right now. So that should get you a good understanding of what's what. But what is powerful in this option is it is portable. I think I have mine with me right now, right? You could throw this into your laptop case, right? Plug it up. You could power it from your laptop and have this working for you whenever you need it. So this is the new option. Now, here's the other thing that I was playing around with. I just got interested. If you go to SeanEnnis.com, if you go to some of the other sites that I host using Ionis. They have VPS options for $474 a year, which is $40 a month. You can get a 12 vCPU, 24 gigs of RAM system. And so that's basically almost double of the Pi, except it's in the cloud and it's paying for it and has internet access and everything that you need. And that server does less than what that little Pi does. So specific hardware does matter. And this hardware is changing. I probably in 6 months, there'll be a new one that I want to showcase in the podcast around this, because I believe that a lot of the experiences that we're all going to be asked to do are going to be at the edge. So just to kind of summarize everything here, using your Mac Mini or your desktop, this could make it very easy, but it could interfere with what you're doing. The NanoPi, it is very efficient, but it is not very performant. So you would use it where you're not hoping to do anything real time. And even batched, it would have to be minimalistic. The Pi 5 with the AI hat, that is an extremely good option for anybody looking to do it. The VPS is really, if you want to put it in the cloud. Now, the cost to get a GPU in the cloud right now is hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month. So there's a reason why the majority of people use the cloud services. And here's a really good example of that. So when you're thinking about your use case and you're like, hey, we can't use the cloud services that everybody else uses, the cost is going to be pretty significant. The challenges you're going to have are going to be very significant. This is why people are using the cloud services. Does that make sense, David?
It does. One of the things that folks should be cognizant of, or at least be aware of. So if anybody's familiar with some of the players in AI, Jan LeCun, who works at Facebook, or did work at Facebook, he's left. One of the fathers of AI, specifically in creating algorithms and things of that nature. He and a couple of other, we'll call them colleagues in the larger, wider sense, are essentially just released a paper. I don't remember the name of it, but I can summarize and give the gist of it. Is essentially go search on Jan LeCun, Cornell University. They host a lot of these technical papers. But the long story short is the way that tokens are compiled and used, and the whole tensor and compiling large language models, and the way that large language models work with predictive analytics and tokenization, and the hardware requirements required to run this. There is word towards third quarter of last year is that they've essentially hit a brick wall. Their performance is getting negligible and more and more negligible. And so be prepared probably towards the middle, maybe third quarter. It seems like, we go to sleep, we wake up and there's something new. But nonetheless, I would say sometime this year in 2026, expect that algorithm that they're all working on and the way and how large language models work, which means all of the hosting components, all of the things like Raspberry Pi that Sean's talking about, all of these other hardware assets, they're going to become even more powerful because they will require less energy, they'll require less compute, and they'll simply just have an operational scale that is unbelievable. Instead of predicting that word in tokens, the way that this algorithm and technology is going to work. It's more along the lines of neural networks, essentially, is how it works. And it's like, has great promise, but it's not quite there yet. Worst case scenario, they hit a brick wall there too, and it might take a little while longer. But this is just one out of many things. The only takeaway I'd say to take away from everything I'm trying to tell you is that change is the only guarantee that is coming. So definitely keep up to date again with all of the different podcasts, this podcast, other podcasts as well. And make sure that if anything, that you don't lock yourself into hardware if you're making big acquisition changes, because this stuff, think of hardware as ubiquitous. It's out there, it's there, whatever. To Sean's point in Ionis that he hosts, I happen to notice, because I wanted to make sure when we put this slide together, I just double checked pricing to see how it was. And I was very surprised at the pricing, especially the size of what he had. I use Vulture, I use Linode, and I use AWS. And so when I saw those prices that Sean had in the slide that we had prepared for you today, I was like, damn, that is super, super cheap. So I went up there and I looked, and it's even cheaper than what Sean had. They have a 36-month deal. It comes out to about maybe $34 or $36 a month, but it's a 3-year commitment. And so to my point of what I was saying is, locking yourself into a 3-year commitment, if you're specifically getting into this for AI. Now, there's a lot of power, computational compute power there, but that doesn't mean that Ionis won't come up with something new to run, say, maybe these new versions of these large language models. Maybe there's something special or whatever that comes out. So if you lock yourself into something for 3 years, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So use some caution. Obviously, you still have to create budgets and need to be held accountable for your P&L. So obviously plan everything within a year, but I would not do any multi-year contracts right now if you're looking at buying hardware or even subscription services like Ionis or cloud-based services for the long term. It's just too volatile right now, and you're going to need that flexibility in order to be able to pivot.
Which is a perfect transition point for the future, right? Talked about RAM being so expensive. What I am hearing is RAM prices are going to peak mid this year and then start getting cheaper the back half of the year. And we'll be back to what we expected in 2028, right? So I want to be careful in that hardware is a game that, frankly, I don't think there is a winner. They're building out these data centers extremely quickly. If you heard late last week, maybe it was the week before last, when CES happened, NVIDIA announced their new hardware. And their new hardware is supposed to be 10x on the read side of large language models, the TPU side. And Google has what's called Ironwood. It's coming out. They're not going to allow anybody else to have it, though. These cloud providers are making it, so they're making their own processors. And we'll see. One of the ones that I was looking at that was so promising from a hardware perspective was something called Grok. And Grok, as not in the AI model, it was a hardware provider. Well, they got bought up by NVIDIA. So I don't know how that's possible. The number one 80% chips is buying one of its competitors, but it did happen. And my hope, just to your point, in the next 6 months, we will have more and more come out. the Raspberry Pi hat is 26 tops. We'll see, hopefully 10x that shortly, and that more and more capability will come out as this technology matures.
So with that being said, we have a whole array of guests coming up for the future here. We're still working on meeting with those folks, trying to get those shows set up. We also have in an upcoming show, either the next one or maybe another one somewhere in the next 1 to 3 shows. We'll be talking about the latest and greatest changes to Claude Code. And so this has been all of the rage over the holidays and a whole bunch of new features. So I'll be giving you guys a quick watered down summary and some documentation to reference and stuff for that in future shows. You can join us on the Transformation Leaders podcast online. On your screen, there's a QR code at the top left corner. And then at the bottom of the screen, obviously, you can see it there. Every Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon, we broadcast out Eastern Standard Time. So please make sure to come and join us. And if you hit us up on LinkedIn, you can hit Sean up or myself. If you go to Transformation Leaders Podcast, you've got links to both Sean and I's profile, as well as if you'd like to join us on the show or you just have some general questions about it or anything that we talk about here on the show, either send us an IM on LinkedIn or you can fill out the form that's there. That form goes to both Sean and I, so we get it at the same time. But that's it for today's show, everybody. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.